Urbanization in the Gilded Age.
Urbanization is where cities are formed and become larger as more and more people begin living and working in central areas. Urbanization mainly occurred due to the industrial economic growth, advanced technology, and the construction of more railroads.
A large amount of people lived in unsafe buildings known as tenements. Tenements were used to house immigrants and lower-class Americans so that they were close to work but separate from middle and upper classes. They normally were not able to receive clean water and were very poorly ventilated. The vent system in the tenements made it easy for fire to spread from building to building if it did occur. The poor housing conditions made it easy for disease to spread. Disease was common during the Gilded Age due to various factors. These factors included high population, unsanitary living areas, and the high number of travelers passing through larger cities. Cholera and yellow fever were occurring at high rates. Tuberculosis was a major killer throughout the slums and cities. Infants were affected most by disease. 25% of babies living in urban areas died before the age of 1. Sewage and trash were dumped into city waterways, which was also a contributing factor of high disease rates.
Many people living in the Gilded Age worked 10-hour shifts, 6 days a week, for an income they were barely able to survive on. Factory work was difficult and injuries and death were frequent. Workers were normally not compensated in the event of an injury. Children, even as young as 8 years old, worked long hours that didn't allow them to attend school. By the early 1900s, there were more than 2 million child laborers employed. The first large organized unions were started during this time period by the unfairly treated workers. They worked together to negotiate for higher wages and better working conditions. Political machines are groups that control the activities of political parties in a city. Graft is the outlawed use of political influence for personal benefit. Tammany Hall is one of the most famous democratic political machines to exist during the Gilded Age. William M. Tweed was the leader and ran it from the late 1860s into the early 1870s. They infamously used rigged elections, bribery, and graft to embezzle about $200 million from the city of New York. Some of the money went to help boost the economy, some went to the building of public buildings, and some went to help people such as widows, the poor, the elderly, the unemployed, and the sickly. Reformers, due to political machines, started to urge for more government involvement in issuing social services. They would be identical services that the political machines provided, but more open and under public scrutiny.
The Otis Elevator Company. Otis started the elevator industry with his safety brake. The company sold its first safe elevators in 1853, and they are still the world's leading elevator company. The Otis Elevator Company building was designed by Clinton and Russell Otis in New York City in 1912. The company used that building until 1973. Offices were on the top floors, while machine shops and stockrooms were on the bottom floors. When the land values in central business districts increased, the construction of tall buildings began to save money. The first true skyscraper was built in 1885 by William LeBaron Jenney. It was a 10-story home insurance company in Chicago. Skyscrapers were possible because of things such as the Otis elevators and steam heating systems. These heating systems put radiators in every room. By 1900, skyscrapers were the most important feature of American skylines.
In the early 1800s, Minneapolis was one of the fastest growing cities. It only had 2.5 miles of sewer systems, making human waste literally fill the streets. The city then started a sewer building campaign, and by 1890, the city had 63.5 miles of sewers. The city's first wastewater treatment plant began in 1938. This was when the city finally got its sewer and water systems aligned with the population.
Chattanooga, Tennessee is where the world's first Coca-Cola bottling company was started in 1899. Before Coke was bottled, it was sold as only a fountain drink for more than 10 years. The bottling company paved the way for how Cokes are sold today. Companies like these brought industry to the city, which influenced more people to move. The Trans-Mississippi West was open for settlement and economic usage due to railroad expansion in combination with government policies such as the Desert Land Act and the Stone and Lumber Land Act. Millions of acres of land and resources and raw materials below the ground were cultivated for use. One of the most popular forms of entertainment during the Gilded Age was theater, mostly vaudeville, which was a type of theater prominent in the late 19th century America. Benjamin Franklin Keith was the creator of the American vaudeville. Keith established his own museum of oddities and developed the policy of consecutive performances, which creates the illusion of thriving business.
Traveling entertainment was extremely popular during this time period. Circuses such as Barnum and Bailey, known as the greatest show on earth, were similar to today's type with animals and performers under the tent. P.T. Barnum started out as the owner of the freak show. Movies were started thanks to Thomas Edison's kinetograph, a new type of camera that would photograph motion pictures.
During the Gilded Age, extra money and free time was spent on new forms of entertainment, like cabaret clubs, music halls, theater, amusement parks, burlesque shows, and dime museums. Even though they had lots of fun, they also had an idea of Puritan work ethic. Puritans were a very strict and self-disciplined group. They put God first and everything else was in the
Peripheral.
They believed the good works they performed in this life would bring them an eternal reward and honor to God. The Puritan hard work was absolute essential for them to become closer to God.
Social Darwinism grew from Charles Darwin's scientific observations of natural selection. Through this idea, Herbert Spencer coined the saying, survival of the fittest. These social Darwinists were led by Herbert Spencer and William Graham Sumner. They opposed any government handouts or safety regulations because they would pamper the weak and allow the inadequate people to survive.
Because the church opposed social Darwinism, it was hard for religious people to accept it. Through the gospel of wealth, people tried to balance their Christian beliefs with social Darwinism. In view of the fact that God only gave a small amount of people with the skills to be successful, Christian virtue urged that the part of the money be shared. This is where the main difference between social Darwinism and the gospel of wealth is.
A third influence in American thinking came from Horatio Alger's dime novels. His books helped answer the question of how to get rich in America. He wrote rags to riches novels, which were very popular. Many of these set an example to young boys, teaching them that their hard work would pay off in the end. This idea is what the multitude of people wished to believe. This became the idea of individualism and the basis for the American dream.
Let me take a selfie.
No, 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 no.